Good morning. This is Tim Stewart. I am president at Visual Decisions, and we're here today to talk about how to increase operational agility with Industry 4.0. At Visual Decisions, we've been in the business of utilizing information from the shop floor to improve operations since about 2002. We help our customers combine the smart factory with the lean factory to drive improvements to cost, throughput, and quality. Our customers have seen dramatic improvements such as 30% increases in OEE, 50% scrap reductions, and more. All right, so to begin here, work with a company that has done surveys and they, got responses from business leaders about what does Agile mean to them. And you can see from the responses here that responsive, adaptive, preemptive, customer focused, all of those things are very typical. For me and the way that I define it, and a lot of the sources that I've looked through from industry standards and so forth, it's really about maximizing responsiveness to market dynamics and unexpected events, and also just being more robust in the face of disruptions. And so when we think about agility and how we create agility within the organization, there's something of a trade-off between focusing on agility and focusing on efficiency. There are things that we can do to maximize our agility in the face of, let's say, changing demand and being able to respond to changing demand. Well, one way that you can do that is you can carry lots of finished goods inventory. And then as demand changes, you have the inventory in place that you need to satisfy that demand. But you do that at the cost of efficiency. And so from an efficiency point of view, what we're trying to do is to minimize that cost of production and distribution so that we can, obviously lower our costs and be more profitable as a business. But if we go too far to the efficiency side, we may miss out on opportunities that present themselves to the business where you have, a potential large order that you can't meet because you don't have the stock on hand in order to be able to meet that. And so there are trade-offs that we have to make. And as we're looking at these trade-offs, what we have in business are shock absorbers. And these are things that businesses put in place in order to be able to deal with disruptions. And these are things like inventory, whether that's raw material inventory, work in process, or finished goods inventory, where you're looking at being able to cover for disruptions in the supply chain or out in your demand cycle. And so you carry inventory in your business in order to be able to cover for when a supplier misses a shipment or there are quality problems with a shipment or things like that, so that you have the inventory on hand to continue production. It's somewhat of just in case type of scenario. Another way that you can look at that is if you have excess capacity within your business, so that if you have that surge in demand, you have the ability to produce those extra goods, both from a machine point of view as well as from a labor point of view. And if you need to change over from one product to another product because of a disruption or a change in demand or something like that, you have that ability to make that change because you have that excess capacity there. From a financial point of view, having those cash reserves of the credit on hand in order to be able to make rapid investments when necessary, in order to capitalize on those opportunities, in order to meet those disruptions and so forth that are happening within the business. And then also from a time perspective, being able to quote a slightly larger lead time than you think you may need in order to meet a customer order, so that you give yourself time to handle any disruptions that come up. For a lot of years, the focus within business has been to run as efficient as possible. And so that's meant reducing these different shock absorbers for the business, and reducing inventory, reducing excess capacities, and so forth. And what this has left business is more vulnerable to disruptions. And over the past 20 months or so, we've seen unprecedented disruptions. Initially with when COVID hit us and we were in the midst of the first throes of the pandemic, being able to just continue operations. Then, as time has gone on, being able to deal with labor disruptions, turnover within the organization, supply chain issues, changes in demand patterns, pretty much everything that can happen to a business has happened over the last 20 months. And so it's really put stresses on businesses that were running very close to the bone, so to speak, and didn't have those shock absorbers in place in order to be able to deal with those different disruptions. So, is the answer here to start running with more inventory, run with more excess capacity, and so forth? Or is there a way that you can shift that trade-off so that if you're looking at agility versus efficiency, is there a way, instead of just switching from one to the other, is it possible to shift that curve out so that I can maintain my efficiency but still increase the agility that I have for the business? And if so, how? And so that's the topic of conversation for today, is how do we actually go about shifting that trade-off? So when we look at how to shift the curve and we look at some of the conversations that are happening within the business, if we look at how can we improve agility, whether that's through systems, through people, through process change, there are conversations that happen kind of at the functional and the plant level that address those different items. So how can we make sure that we have alignment between our source, our make, our deliver processes? How can manufacturing ensure that it's always in sync with the supply chain? How quickly and effectively can systems be replanned in the face of internal and external disruptions? Those are things that from a systems perspective, we can put in place that help increase that agility over time. From a people perspective, how do we create a culture so that people become problem solvers and make better use of the data that's there and so forth, become more data driven, so that as disruptions happen, they can understand what the nature of that problem is and what are the different solutions that they can put in place. And then from a process perspective, how can I use lean or operational excellence processes to become more responsive to those changes in customer demand? Or how do I remove monuments that are in my processes to improve that flexibility that I have within my organization? And then, from a different side of the conversation, when we're looking at efficiencies, typically what we're trying to find are the different value leaks that are occurring within the operations. So whether that's, a lack of throughput, quality issues, cost overruns, delivery issues, those are all things that are going to create losses within my organization. So how do I identify those and how do I fix those? And then within the broader supply chain, if I look at supplier quality or material costs, how can I address those things and identify and eliminate those? And so when we're looking at shifting the curve, a lot of these different conversations, we have to keep both of those different mindsets in mind as we're looking for solutions. So when we look at the agile and efficient organization, I've broken this down into a few different aspects of the operation. First and foremost, in order to be both agile and efficient, you have to be customer centric. You have to be able to move with the market, move with demand, and understand your customers, so that as your customers are evolving, you can anticipate those changes to some extent and be ready for them as a business. Within operations and supply chain, as I look at this, one of the first things is being able to have that rapid visibility to the disruptions as they're occurring. So being able to understand where my inventory is, where I have supply coming in, where I may lack the supply, and what I can actually do about it. So in the face of labor or supply disruptions, what can I do from a replanning perspective in order to very rapidly adjust my operations and put a new plan in place that I can actually execute given the resources that I have available? How do I eliminate monuments? From a lean manufacturing perspective, a monument is anything that is fixed in place, whether that's from a physical perspective, like you have a pole that is supporting the roof within the plant. That means that you can't put any physical machines in place in that particular place. But it can also be from a process perspective. What monuments do I have in my process that are similarly fixed that I can't adapt in the face of changing business conditions? And then, being able to balance that efficiency and agility so that I carry enough inventory to respond to things and be able to shift my focus when I need to, but still run as efficiently as I can given that constraint. From a leadership and culture perspective, being able to have a consistent strategy for the business and keep it moving in the same general direction, but have very fluid tactics as the business conditions change. And what that's going to require, it's simple to say, but how do you maintain alignment and focus across your organization when you have that changing nature of tactics within the operations? And so one thing there is obviously clear communication and being able to continually update the people within your organization of what they need to be doing in that given time based on how the business is trying to respond to things. But it's also continuous visibility of performance so that I can understand in any given time period where I'm at with my performance and how well I am aligned to what the organization needs. From an organization structure and adaptability, this is another monument that we put within our business, where the organization structure itself is rigid enough that it becomes difficult to respond to changing business conditions. And so what we want to do is, as much as possible, eliminate the barriers between teams. And very often that means not necessarily changing reporting structures and so forth, but allowing much more fluid communication and teamwork between the different organizations within our business. And then integrated systems platforms so that we can communicate much more effectively between the different groups and so forth. Having some fluidity to the reporting structure and being able to create tiger teams and so forth within the business to handle situations as they arise. And then that alignment of measurement and rewards so that, as people are having these different directions that they get pulled in, how do we measure how much they're contributing to the business and reward them for those contributions? From an agile product innovation and development point of view, no matter how fast engineering can come up with new designs, if we can't make them and source them and so forth, then they're not going to do us any good if they just sit within our CAD systems. And so we have to have that integration with manufacturing, with sourcing and so forth, so that we can actually rapidly introduce those new products to the marketplace and not just design them. And how do we increase the cycles of improvements that we have with our products so that we can basically be continually improving those and bring that theory of continuous improvement that we have in operations to the design of our products as well. And some of that is going to be visibility to the telematics or the use of the product out in the field. And how do we get that feedback loop occurring not just from manufacturing into design, but from our customers into design as well. And then elimination of any waste or barriers to change within that organization as well. So at Visual Decisions, we really believe that all of these goals are accomplished by combining the smart factory and the lean factory. How do you become smart and lean in order to become agile and efficient? And one key way that you can do that is by creating a digital management operating system. We talked a couple slides ago about from a leadership and culture perspective, being able to have a consistent strategy and fluid tactics. Well, part of that is being able to put clear measurements in place so that you can direct the people within your organization in the way that you want them to go. And being able to have the visibility of your current level of performance and so forth is driven based on how the business is actually performing. What are the different things that you can see within the business and measure, and giving everybody a roadmap for how that aligns with the overall objectives of the company. And so you have that strategy that gets broken down, and you have the ability to then align and adapt to those changing business conditions, because you have that now built within this digital management operating system, and you can adapt that on the fly as the needs change. But you still have the visibility for everyone that they can go in and they can see where they stand, what is important for them to be paying attention to at any given time. And ultimately, to become agile, everyone in the organization needs to get that immediate feedback on whether their activities are helping the reality, the business face the reality of that very moment. When I first started Visual Decisions, I was working with a customer where I was putting together dashboards for their operations. And in talking with the COO, I asked what he wanted his plant managers to be able to see on their dashboards. And his response was that he wanted them to see everything they needed to know if they were winning or losing that day, but nothing more than that. There could be drill downs or other reports with additional details, but he wanted them laser focused on winning each hour, each shift, each day. And he wanted that to be changing based on what the business conditions of the day were, what winning meant. And so winning is somewhat of a fluid term that changes based on how those business conditions change. And so it may be that you are you go into the day thinking you're going to build these products, but based on who shows up, based on the materials that you have available, based on changes in customer demand, maybe you need to make C and D instead of A and B. And so winning may be being able to make that change and adapt to those different circumstances. And so it became clear that what winning really meant was, can you run the business profitably during that day? And as a lean guru, he suggested that I forget about all the overhead allocations performed by finance and really focus on the costs that were controllable by the plant. And he wanted a crystal clear view at a glance of whether the plants were making a profit in real time and why that was the case. And so when you break this down into how do we determine winning or losing, it's really given everything that we know about the business in real time, am I doing everything I can to optimize profitability while still setting myself up for long-term success? There's a big focus within lean manufacturing around single minute exchange of dies, or SMED, and either eliminating or minimizing setups and changeovers. And the idea here is that we're essentially eliminating barriers to change. And we certainly want to do this within operations, because as we minimize the amount of time it takes to change from one product to another, we're actually increasing both our agility and our efficiencies. We're shifting that curve. If you think about, taking the machine down to perform a changeover, you're hurting your efficiencies. You're taking the machine out of production. But if I eliminate that barrier to change, I also can now shift on a dime from product A to product B to product C and not lose anything for the operation. So become more agile as well. And the same mindset that we adopt within operations to eliminate these setups and changeovers, we should apply throughout the entire company to eliminate barriers to change. And one thing that I want to focus on here is that standard work is actually a very important part of this. And you might think that standard work itself is kind of a barrier to change, that we're adopting a mindset of this is, the way that things are done. But that's not actually the lean point of view of what standard work really means. Standard work itself can adapt and evolve over time, but we want everybody that does a job to do it in the same way. And we want to have easy cross-training for people so that most anybody can perform most any task because they have the guidelines, they have the step-by-step instructions that let them know exactly how to do it. And so this really helps in terms of a lot of the labor disruptions that we've been seeing over time in the last 20 months, where you're capturing that organizational knowledge within the standard work. And if somebody doesn't show up for work on a given day, you can just have Larry come over, and Larry can now do that task because there are standard work instructions for how to do that. And it also ensures kind of a common level of performance between the different people in the organization because everybody's doing that same task in that same way. And so the key here is not to let that standard work become a monument, that you do adapt that standard work over time. You're continually looking for ways to improve it. You still have that Kaizen mindset of looking for better ways and improving that standard work. But having the standard work in place allows you to deal with a lot of the labor disruptions that we've been seeing in business for the past 20 months. Value stream mapping is another thing that we do within lean manufacturing, and digitizing that can help significantly for all the different things that we're talking about. A traditional value stream mapping process looks very much like what you see in the picture there, with a big wall of sticky notes and aligning everything in terms of how the process flows and so forth. And then looking at who's involved with that process, how much time does it take, how much time does it take between steps and so forth. And it's usually a very time-intensive process to be able to generate one of these maps. And then typically, well, it kind of just hangs on the wall there once you're done. Everybody leaves with a richer understanding of how the process works, and you can utilize that to improve the process and so forth, but it's pretty much static. If you digitize how you do value stream mapping, first of all, you can do all of your products at once instead of one product at a time. It's more accurate and precise. It reflects the true process as opposed to how people think it works. You show all the process deviations and so forth. Where that's important in terms of agility and so forth is if I have a better understanding of how all of my products flow, where I have waste within that process and so forth, I can not only understand the barriers to improving the efficiency of that process, I can also look at how I have barriers to change to go from one product to another. And this really helps me understand not only the single value stream for optimizing that efficiency, but really understanding the business as a whole, the operations as a whole, for knowing how things happen when I have that complexity of the business and I'm changing from one product to another. I'm making those shifts and adjustments on a daily basis, and I can have that feedback so that as I'm working with this information on a daily basis, I can measure against those standards and see where I have exceptions, and then immediately put attention on those. Planning and replanning is another huge key to becoming more agile. And I have a long background with planning and scheduling systems. And one of the keys there is to reduce the planning cycle. When I started in that business, ERP was run weekly at best, or MRP was run weekly at best, to be able to come up with a new plan for how we were going to build things within manufacturing. And often it was run in a monthly bucket, and then it was just up to production to kind of manage things within that monthly bucket. And back in the 90s, advanced planning systems were put in place that allowed you to replan on a daily basis, so that you could really, put a cycle in place so that you could replan every single day based on the changes that were happening within the business. And if we look at why that's important, when you have these deviations from, what the plan was supposed to be, and as we've talked about, there are a lot of deviations happening in business these days. Things don't always go according to plan. So once you start getting those variations from the plan, you have a lack of material coordination within your operations. You might starve yourself from raw material. You might be producing the wrong product because of changes in demand profile. Operators will go off script to make what they can instead of what the business really needs. Others will stay on script, even though it may not be possible to complete those orders any longer. So you're wasting capacity within your operations, building things that you can't actually produce the entire part. So you're making one part of it, but the rest of it's not being made. And so you're wasting that capacity. And it causes the entire production team to lose faith in that scheduling process. So if you can replan on a regular basis, that helps you stay in alignment. Well, as we look at that cycle, as business conditions are changing ever more rapidly, if we can get to the point where we're essentially doing real-time planning, delivering that information to the floor, and then being able to execute that real-time plan that's continuously adapting on the fly, then that gives us the ability as an organization to really change on a dime within operations and to adjust what we're doing based on what those current business conditions are. So if we have that real-time visibility and are able to feed that into the planning system, and the planning system is able to continuously adjust what we should be doing, then we can really measure ourselves against, how are we doing against that plan as it evolves over time. And there are technologies that are out there today that allow us to come ever closer to this goal of continuous planning. And part of that is that we have to have the systems in place that give us that real-time feedback of what materials are in place, who's available, what skills do we have in place to run different processes today, what machines are up or down within the plant, and what can they run, and so forth. And having all of that institutional knowledge built into these algorithms so that we can make those adjustments and adaptations on the fly and become truly agile within our operations. And again, a huge part of that is reducing those barriers to change also. So, running the SMED programs within our operations and taking that same mindset and reducing all the other barriers to change within our operations. So that is our half hour for today. I want to thank you. If you have questions, please reach out to me at tim@visualdecisions.com, or my phone number is there as well. And thank you, and I will talk to you again in a week.